And his father, Benjamin Harrison V, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, so they kind of have this long history with the United States. He was a third son, so obviously he had to come up with a different career. And so when his father died, he decided to go into the military. His father really wanted him to be a doctor. He kind of put up with it for a while, and then the minute his dad died, he switched careers. He was a general in the War of 1812. At the Battle of Tippecanoe, he had a very nice win against the British. And so as soon as he won that battle, he decided to retire from the army and go on a victory tour because he had done such a good job winning this battle in 1812. So he campaigned as a war hero, as someone who was one of the people. He was from down home, log cabin and hard cider. You do remember that I said he was from a plantation earlier in his career. His family was very established. He was actually a learned student of the classics. He loved luxurious living, so he was constantly in debt. But he definitely kind of ignored that when he was running for president. He was also a slave owner, and he believed the rights of the states to make their own decision regarding slavery. This is 20 years before that conflict of the Civil War. And so when he was nominated and won the election, he went to Washington, and his wife was not able to go because she wasn't feeling very well. So he took one of his daughters or daughter-in-laws, I can't remember which one, and he gave the longest speech on record, still, for his inaugural address, still, how many years later, right? Didn't wear a coat, it was raining, it was March 4th, right? Raining, cold, because we don't know what that's like here. Raining, cold, and spoke for over 2 hours. I mean, it's ridiculous. And not only that, if you think about Washington at the time, it was definitely not the way it is today. It was swampland, right? And so there's a good chance he kind of was sick before he did that. And so he died 32 days into office. He was the first president to die in office, which really put everybody in a tizzy because they're like, oh my gosh, what do you do when the president dies in office? We have no idea, this has never happened before. And so he's kind of responsible for them figuring out how that process is going to work if it ever happens again, which we know it does happen again. So William Henry Harrison, one of us, good old boy from down home, hard cider, whichever way you want to look at it. Ulysses S. Grant was the first Ohio-born president. He went to West Point. He fought in the Mexican-American War. He actually married a wonderful woman named Julia Dent on August 22nd, 1848. And the interesting thing about Julia is she was from a southern slaveholding family. Now, how do we know Grant? Civil War. And who did he fight for? The North, the Union, right? And so there was a little bit of problems with his in-laws and the fact that he was not from a slaveholding family. And he was really good as a army hero, as an army general. His father-in-law actually gave Julia a slave when they got married, and he freed that person right away, which then made his farm not do so well, and so he was always having trouble at first to getting jobs. And so he was in the army. And the thing is, when you think of Grant, you kind of think of him as this larger-than-life hero, right? Because we've studied him, we've heard about him. He was like 5'6" and weighed 120 pounds when he was like in the war. And there's a story about how he got really drunk one time when he was stationed in California, and they were like making a big deal about it. Well, think about what liquor was like in the 1840s, and a 120-pound man, one drink probably put him under the table, let alone two, right? So that was kind of one of these things that stuck with him. He was very willing to fight. He was the first Union commander to truly take the war into the South. And in early 1864, he was named the Lieutenant General and Commander of Union Forces. And then in 1866, he was named General of the Armies, which was a rank that was achieved by no one other than George Washington at that time. So after the Civil War, He obviously was a national hero. He was surpassed in stature only by one person, and that would have been President Abraham Lincoln. And so when he ran for president, he was 46 years old, and he didn't campaign. And got elected by a landslide. So that was kind of how he became a president. What's interesting about Grant is that he is one of 2 Ohio presidents that actually got elected to serve a second term. He's the only one that finished the second term. All right. He also ran for a 3rd term, but he didn't win. And so he did pass a lot of things while he was president. So this is him. This is him right here. As you can see, he's not a very big person. And after he was still very popular. I like him because his speeches were all like 75 minutes. Like he has one of the shortest speeches of the inaugural address. Both of them are very short. He just got right to the point all the time. And at his death, he actually wrote his memoirs and died a few days after they were finished. And he had throat cancer. And so that's kind of what provided for his wife after he passed away, that income from those memoirs. So he did pass a couple interesting amendments and acts. One of them was the 15th Amendment, which gave citizens the right to vote regardless of race or previous servitude. In 1871, he enacted the Ku Klux Klan Act, which countered the rise of terrorist activities in the South. And he fought to protect the rights of African Americans more than any 19th century president. And he did 2 world tours, or he did a 2-year world tour after he finished being a president. And he was greeted all over the world as someone very popular, somebody very well known, and very well liked. Now, back to Julia briefly. So her family's in Missouri, but she never once went against her husband. She supported him 100%, even though her family fought for the South. And so they had a really, really strong marriage, and that is always kind of interesting. Hayes actually was elected after the most lengthy, bitterly disputed, and corrupt presidential elections in history until recently. And the election was so corrupt, it was really impossible to determine who would have won if the election would have been honest. And so because of this, Hayes vowed that he was only going to serve 1 term. And so Hayes is from close by. He lived, he grew up in Fremont. He married Lucy Webb, who was a very vivacious, bright, she was an unpretentious woman. She had strong beliefs in Methodism, temperance, which you probably know, and abolition. Hayes attended Harvard Law School. He was also in the Civil War. There's 5 of the presidents that served in the Civil War. Obviously, Grant was the first one. And Hayes was so active in the Civil War, he actually had 4 horses shot out from underneath him during the length of the conflict and managed to survive. While he was serving in the Union Army, his friends elected him or nominated him for Congress. And so he ended up, when he came home, stepping into his role as a congressman. And then in 1867, he decided he wasn't going to do politics. He kind of thought about giving it up. And then in 1871, he became governor of Ohio. So, he kind of kept getting roped back into the whole politics. And then he became governor again in 1875. He was good friends with Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison actually came to the White House and showed this newfangled contraption called a record player, whatever it was called back then. And he also traveled more widely than any previous president. And his wife, who was the temperance person, is the reason why they have this reputation of not having alcohol in the White House during his 4 years in the White House. The other really interesting thing about campaigning at this time is that, believe it or not, the presidential candidates didn't campaign. They didn't debate, they didn't give speeches. Oh, what a joy that would have been. But he was really good, because he was a lawyer, at whenever he would write something for Congress or while he was president, he would write it for the general public to understand, which is why he became so popular, because they actually understood what he was talking about half the time. And so he would get his points across in that way. So yes, presidential campaigning, the presidents didn't campaign. They sent everybody else out to do it. So. There's a really good mini-series on Netflix about him. It's mostly accurate. If you want to watch it, you should watch it. I haven't finished it. I watched the first 2 episodes of it. But anyways, he was the last president that was born in a log cabin. So he was definitely from a very poor family. He had a reputation as a keen debater. He was a very eloquent speaker. So if you do watch that series, what is it, Death by Lightning or something like that, when he stands up and gives that speech and they end up electing him as the nominee, like that's what he was known for, is those really great speeches that just kind of like got everybody excited and rallied behind him. In 1860, he was reputed to be one of the Republicans' most effective stump speakers. Again, the presidential candidate didn't go out and debate. They would send people. He was really good at it. He helped get Hayes nominated and a few other people. He was also considered to be a very radical politician in his early years. He eventually tempers that enthusiasm as he became a seasoned politician. And he was actually the first presidential candidate to engage in a front porch campaign. Now we know the front porch campaigns because of McKinley and Harding, but he was actually the first one. He didn't campaign from his front porch, but he also didn't leave his front porch and let people come to talk to him at his home in Ohio. And so that's kind of what started that tradition. He married his wife, Lucretia. They had a secret engagement. Their marriage was a little troubled at first. He was a little bit of a ladies' man. He eventually was very active in his political career. I think they had 5 kids, so very, very, very romantic. We'll just go with that one. And then in 1880, he went to the Republican convention to speak for somebody else to get nominated. And initially it was between Ulysses S. Grant and James G. Blaine fighting for the nomination from the Republicans. And he won on the 36th ballot. He had 399 votes to 306 for Grant. He was not planning on running for president. He kind of fell into it. And he was shot 100 days after being in office. And his assassin, Charles Guiteau, actually chose the gun that he chose, which was a .44 British Bulldog. He chose it specifically because he thought it would look very impressive in a museum exhibit. And so if you want to see that gun, I do believe it's at the McKinley Museum in Stark County. So I believe that they have it. If not, they have one that's like it. So, but anyways, so you know, he kind of thought about this a little bit. Now, Garfield shouldn't have died when he was shot. The bullet didn't hit any major organs. What happened is he had some doctors who didn't believe in sterile instruments. They were kind of the old school, and they wouldn't let the new school of doctors work on him. And so they were sticking things in their fingers in the bullet hole, scalpels in the bullet hole, things that were dirty, and he actually died of sepsis and was completely infected throughout his body 100 days after he was shot. So it's kind of a tragedy because I think he probably would have been a really good president, but unfortunately, those old doctors knew what they were doing, so we don't want them to work on us. Benjamin Harrison, who was actually the grandson of William Henry Harrison, was also a lawyer. He was a lawyer that only accepted high-profile cases. He went to the Senate in 1881 to 1887, and he ended up moving to Indiana to kind of move away from his family a little bit and kind of establish himself as his own person. He's like the 6th or 7th Benjamin Harrison, like the first son of all the Harrisons were named Benjamin, so he was the first son of his dad, and that's why his name is that. I don't know what number he is. But he was known for only taking high-profile cases. He championed pensions for Civil War vets. He believed in high protective tariffs. He was responsible for modernizing the Navy. And he also was responsible for the conservation of Western lands. So Harrison moved to Indiana. When he ran for president, he had a very polite presidential campaign in 1888. He also planned on doing a front porch campaign, kind of similar to what Garfield did. But the first crowd was so large that they wouldn't fit in his front yard, so they had to walk down to the park next door. And so then he started doing his speeches at the park. But he did kind of start that idea. He married his wife Caroline on October 20th in 1853. He was 20, she was 21. He signed statehood bills for North and South Dakota, Washington, Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. So very much involved in expanding the United States. He signed the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, which was the first federal law to regulate giant corporations. He created the National Forest with the Land Revision Act of 1891. And he was the one that beat Grover Cleveland in that election, and then lost to him in the next election. So they were both very close elections. So kind of what happened is they were kind of mad at the way things were going, so they voted for the other guy, and then they kind of got mad at the way he was doing things, and then they voted for the other guy again. So it was kind of like one of those back and forth ones. And on January 1st, 1892, he had federal officials designate Ellis Island as an official entry point of immigrants arriving in New York City. So Harrison is very much the president and his administration that launched the nation on the road to kind of what we know as our empire, as the United States empire, right? Kind of expanding it, increasing the Navy. His wife, Carolyn, here is an interesting character. She was an artist. And so she actually designed the White House china that they used in the White House. She actually designed the border and everything on it. She also was very responsible for them coming in and fixing up the White House, because apparently it was a mess. There was some issues with rodents and a few other things because nobody had been taking care of it. And she had electricity installed. Unfortunately, the electricity scared her so much that she had somebody else turn it on and off for her because she was afraid to touch it. But she did definitely do that. She died when he was running for his second term, which is also probably another reason why he didn't do so well. But you can see his house is still a historic site in Indianapolis, and it's quite beautiful. Was our 25th president. He also started out in a legal career. He married Ida Saxton on January 25th, 1871, and Ida was kind of known as sort of the belle of Canton. Her father was a banker. She was really well known. He served in the House of Representatives from 1877 to 1891. He was governor of Ohio, became governor of Ohio in January of 1892. And in 1896, he was nominated on the first ballot for president. And what's interesting about McKinley is he is the last Civil War president and the first modern president of the United States. And what I mean by that is when he campaigned and when he became president, he made a lot of changes to how things are done. For instance, in 1896, he spent $4 million, $4,1896, for his campaign. Most of those funds went into printing and distributing over 200 million pamphlets. So we can blame him for all that mail that we get and all those signs in the yard. He also had 350 carefully crafted speeches that he would send out and that he would also give from his front porch, because he had one of the most successful front porch campaigns. 750,000 delegates actually came to see him speak over the time of his campaigning. He was the first president to initiate a war room in the White House during the Spanish-American War of 1898. And so he would keep track with, like, close contact with his generals and stuff via telegraph. They had maps. It's kind of like what you think of today. But he was the first one that actually had it in the White House and was, like, paying attention on day-to-day, hour by hour, what was happening to his troops. He had 1,400 party speakers stump the nation. He did run for re-election in 1900. His popularity had risen a lot because of his image as the victorious commander-in-chief of the Spanish-American War, as well as the nation having returned to a general economic prosperity. Definitely helps when people are happy. So he ran for a second term. He did get inaugurated for a second term. He also was really good about greeting people when he was out talking. And so at the Buffalo Pan American Exposition, he was out greeting people after a lunch, which when we open our exhibit, we actually have his last cup, saucer, cigar, and a few other things from his last meal before he was assassinated that will be on display. And I'll get back to the cigar thing in a second. But he was shot as he was greeting people coming into the Hall of Music. He ended up getting gangrene and dying 10 days after he was shot, which is why he was the only president to get elected for a second term from Ohio, but not actually serve his entire second term. So Grant and McKinley. That's a good Trivial Pursuit question or Jeopardy if you need to know it. But cigars, like he also was very good about having photographers kind of like chronicle his time in the White House. And if you look for pictures, you'll never see one of him smoking because he didn't want people to know about it. It was like a habit he had, and so he would like all of his pictures. You never see anything like that. They're very much done the way that he would like them to be done. He also had a really famous female photographer named Frances Benjamin that took a lot of his photographs and stuff, and she was really well known at the time. So William Taft. William Taft was from Cincinnati. He was elected with one of the greatest popular majorities in the nation's history in 1909. He had a very stellar legal career. He was second in his graduating class at Yale. He attended the University of Cincinnati Law School, and he passed the bar in 1880. He married a wonderful woman named Helen Nellie Taft in 1886. And his marriage to Nellie pretty much helped project him into the presidency, and I'll talk about that in a second. But when President McKinley was president, he appointed him as civil governor of the Philippines. Now, Taft always wanted to be on the Supreme Court. That was like his greatest dream. But while he was in the Philippines, he was so dedicated to the work that he was doing there that he was offered a position on the Supreme Court twice, in October 1901 and January 1903, and he said no to both because he wasn't done doing what he needed to do in the Philippines. He was very dedicated to what he did. In May 1903, he became President Roosevelt's Secretary of War, and so Roosevelt chose him as a successor. Taft was actually a great Secretary of War. He did a really good job. He didn't want to be president, but Helen wanted him to be president, because when Helen was a kid, she went to see the Hayes at the White House and said that she was going to someday be married to the President of the United States. So I think she might have had a little bit of a push to get him to do it, as did President Roosevelt. So Taft, I think, was actually probably a pretty good president. He was one of the first presidents in a long time to actually balance the budget and actually like have money left over. He did it within 2 years. What? Like, that's amazing. He was very well liked, but the problem with him is he had this issue when he was stressed of eating a lot. So he was stressed all the time. He gained a ton of weight. Then he would go play golf because he just wanted to avoid what was happening. And so Roosevelt ended up hating him by the end of his term because he wasn't doing what Roosevelt thought he should do. So Roosevelt ran against Taft in 1913, splitting the party in half, because of course Roosevelt ran as an independent, but you know that the Republicans were the ones that voted for him, which basically meant that the Democrats won that year. So they kind of split the vote on that. And it wasn't until President Warren Harding was president that he named Taft to the Supreme Court in June of 1921, where he served until March of 1930, which was his lifelong dream. He was the chief of the Supreme Court. He was very good at that job. So it kind of, another one of those presidents that sort of landed in the presidency. He's not really sure why he went there, but tried to do the best he could. And unfortunately made an enemy of Teddy Roosevelt. So, cabinet, and they kind of influenced him and took advantage of the fact that they were friends with him. And there is a rumor that he gambled away the entire White House china set, entire White House china set, which is, there's multiple sets of china, in a card game. I don't know if it's true or not. It's kind of fun. So he went on a tour 2 years into his presidency. He went out west and trying to kind of avoid some of the scandal that was hitting the press. And he ended up dying of cardiac arrest when he was out west, and I think he was in San Francisco at the time, but which was really sad. So then he was also a president that died in office, but at least he wasn't assassinated. He died of natural causes. And so this is his cabinet here, which apparently a lot of them are from Ohio. He was good friends with Henry Ford and a few other people, stuff. So he definitely knew a lot of important people. The other thing I wanted to say that I forgot to say is that, so Nellie Taft, who really, really would have rather been the president than her husband, was the only first lady to ride to the inauguration with the president-elect. Usually the president would ride with the previous president. She kicked that guy out and said, no, I'm going to do this. So anyway, so they definitely made a good power couple, I think. I think he probably would never have been president without that. So that's just kind of a brief overview, kind of about the presidents. I thought I would open it up to questions